Welcome to Bears on Tap, hosted by Kyle Juice Michalski, Quentin Q. Crisco, Sonny Verma, and the one and only Ron Luce. Bringing you all the news, analysis, and opinions on the charter franchise, Chicago Bears.
And welcome back to another episode of Bears on Tap. My name is Quentin Crisco. Unfortunately today, Ron, Sonny, and Kyle couldn't join me, but I'm very excited that we are starting this new series called Know Your Enemy, right? And it's all about divisions and our division, the NFC North. And we're here joined today by Ryan Mathews, the senior editor for Pride of Detroit, to talk Detroit Lions. Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Quentin. Thanks for having me on the show. Looking forward to talking some NFC North ball, man.
Yeah, absolutely. The black and blue division, right?
That's right.
Now, before we get too much into it, I want to ask a little bit about your background as a Lions fan. Have you been a Lions fan your whole life? What's your experience as a football fan and a Lions fan?
Yeah, I was born in 1991, so right around the time that the Lions were last good, and it's been an odyssey. My Lions fandom has followed me throughout my life, and there's been obviously a lot of ups and downs and ebbs and flows, but there hasn't been a more rewarding time, I think, in my adult life watching professional sports than watching what's happening with this Lions team right now. I mean, there were some good Tigers teams back during my college days with Miguel Cabrera winning the Triple Crown, and their pitching staff was incredible. Just came up short. The Red Wings, I fell in love with the Red Wings, and their Stanley Cups are awesome. But there's something about the Lions finally, reaching the top of the summit, in the NFC North and coming pretty darn close to getting all the way to the prize land in the Super Bowl. So that's the goal now, but that's Lions fandom in a nutshell.
Beautiful. So for any of our listeners out there, I just want to give you a quick rundown on what exactly we're talking about here. So Ryan's going to tell us a bit about the Lions schematically, and then I'm going to ask him some questions about, how would you attack the Lions? So if you're a Bears fan listening to this going, I don't care about the Lions, this episode is about how to watch these games this season, how to think about, what needs to happen for the Bears to beat the Lions, or what if it doesn't happen, the Lions are probably going to beat the Bears. But starting that off, just looking at the roster here, what would you call the strength of this roster?
It's without a doubt their offensive line. I know it's just a unit itself, but it drives everything the Detroit Lions want to be able to do. And with the offensive line, it starts with Penei Sewell, who I think very well, if he's not the best offensive lineman in the NFL, he's number 2. He's just incredibly athletic. Some of the unique things that the Lions are able to do schematically, and we'll talk into some of those things a little bit later on, but what they're able to do on offense all starts with those 5 guys up front. Frank Ragnow, I think he might finally be recognized as the best center in the NFL with Jason Kelce's retirement last season. Frank is as tough as they come, tough as nails, a guy who embodies the grit that Dan Campbell and his coaching staff have instilled here in terms of their culture. And they lose Jonah Jackson in the offseason, but they pick up Kevin Zeitler, and that seems like even, if anything, right? I mean, Zeitler, one of the best pass blocking guards in the NFL.
I was going to say, I think I consider it an upgrade. And I don't think Jonah Jackson's bad, but I think Zeitler has been near the top of the game for a while now.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, 34 years old, but the guy is still, as you mentioned, he's right at the top of his game still. So, him, Graham Glasgow comes back after spending some time in Denver and signing a contract out there. And he was phenomenal for the Lions last year, but I'll tell you what, without that offensive line being healthy, you saw some of the bumps and bruises along the way last season, especially, and even the year before that in 2022, when the Lions suffered injuries up front. It was devastating. It was almost as if they didn't really have a chance. But last season, they were able to weather the storm a little bit more. They had a little bit more depth. Like Glasgow wasn't a starter to begin the year, but when Halapuli Palivaitai, when he went down, Graham stepped in. They got some okay time from a rookie and Colby Sorsdal. Still really, I mean, a guy from William and Mary who his development is gonna take some time. But yeah, I think that truly this offense is, for his, all the awesome skill position players that they have, their 5 guys up front are the lifeblood to what this team excels at.
And you mentioned Halupi Vaitai, and I'm noticing I don't have him on this graphic here. Is he still on the roster, or was he on IR maybe, or did I just miss him?
No, he's done. Halapuli Palivaitai is, he suffered, some awful back injuries that tried coming back from, and he's just not healthy anymore. So I think it's a career for Vaitai.
Okay, that makes some sense then. That's
Yeah.
why I didn't see him on there. Now, you talked about the depth, and I mean, I think it's kind of every NFL team, right? Every NFL fan base comes in the season saying, if we just stay healthy, we're fine. But all 32 teams get injuries on the O-line. Like, it's going to happen. Guys are going to miss games every year. Who on this O-line do you feel comfortable with as the depth pieces, the guys who can step in and maybe play a game here, a game there, and maybe a variety of roles?
Sure. Dan Skipper is a guy that, heaven forbid anything were to happen to either Panay or Taylor Decker. He's a guy.
Big is Skipper?
He's big. He's
like
he's a mountain of a man.
Like
yeah,
6'9".
6'9". Yeah, he's a real big guy. More of an asset, I would say, probably in pass protection than he is in run blocking, just because of how big he is. But again, a tendency to get beaten. I mean, there aren't enough offensive tackles queued to go around the league. So, having depth at offensive tackle is really like a luxury upon luxury. Dan Skipper is below replacement level, but he's okay. I think that they can do enough schematically where, okay, if either Panay or Taylor are out, well, they can kind of overcompensate, and they have Zeitler. They can do some other things with tight ends and things like that. But I'm expecting some big things out of Colby Sorsdal too. I know they've cross-trained him a little bit. He was a tackle at William and Mary in college, and then he made the move inside last year, but he's back training a little bit at tackle. I think that they're really comfortable with putting more on his plate in his second year now. So he's a guy who could be a first man in either at tackle or most likely the first guy in when it comes to somebody along the interior of the offensive line.
Okay. And then where does Christian Mahogany fit into all this? Is he a guy who you think is going to walk in and start, getting reps as a second teamer somewhere, or is he a guy who you think is more developmental?
I view Mahogany as a player who, I think first and foremost, he does seem the most seasoned, obviously, of any of the players coming in. I know Manu, the guard that they drafted from British Columbia. He's a big dude, very, very green though. He's going to come along very, very slowly. But yeah, I truly think that with Mahogany, you have a guy who is going to start with a third team. It just happens with guys like that. Nobody on this team in training camp, very rarely are they playing like first team reps. And Brian Branch is a guy that we'll talk about later on, but he's one of the few guys that I can think of off the top of my head that he just came in and he was playing like second team for a week, and then he was with the first teamers, and it was clear that they couldn't keep the guy off the field. So a lot of these guys, they earn their spot. I would say all of them do actually, but each and every day, whether it's a veteran or it's a young guy, you're playing to let that coaching staff know that they can trust you in spots. And a lot of the rookies will start further down the depth chart with the threes. Yeah.
So you mentioned Giovanni Manu, and man, as a Bears fan, I was sitting here seeing, what was it, the third round or the fourth round? Fourth round, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Fourth round, Detroit Lions pick come up, Giovanni Manu, British Columbia, and I'm laughing, I'm like, who is this guy that the Lions just took? And then a few days later, I'm doing a draft recap show. I'm like, I should look at this guy, see like what he looks like at least. And I Google him, and my jaw drops. I'm like, oh my God, they don't make humans like that.
Right.
That's too big and too strong all in one. Like, so yeah, I get why they took him there, but like, in the moment I was giving it a laugh, and now I'm kind of hoping that doesn't come back to bite me after seeing him and just having flashes of the Eagles left tackle, who was a very similar type mold.
Yeah, did you see the video of Manu jumping and doing the vertical? Guy used to play basketball. Can you imagine that body on the basketball court?
I think somewhere, or maybe I'm getting that confused. But no,
yeah.
that was my lot of the Eagles guy playing rugby. So no, I did not see the video you're talking about.
Yeah, he's an athletic freak, and Howie Roseman spoke to that. And you mentioned the Eagles offensive lineman. Howie Roseman was talking about how you get later in the draft, just draft freaks, draft guys who will Jason Kelsey is another example. Like, he's just a guy who, like, athletically tested off the charts, weren't really sure what the future might hold for him, but lo and behold, he becomes the best center in the NFL. And then, I think that was kind of the thought process with some of these later picks with Brad Holmes. It's like, I can swing for the fences now because I've built a little bit of depth and foundation of this roster. But Giovanni definitely fits the mold of, you know what? It's a luxury pick. If the guy ends up being great, we took the risk.
Yeah. And then final thought on this O line, just because I'm an offensive line guy, this is probably the segment that I'm gonna give the most in here. But man, I watched every down of the wild card round when you guys played Tampa.
That was the divisional round.
Round. Lions don't win that game without Penny Sewell.
Yeah.
Like, Penny Sewell was the most valuable player in that game, and you cannot say that about an offensive tackle very often. He just hit a different tier of play that was like, he willed the team to victory in moments, it felt like to me.
Yeah, I mean, if they need some yards, run it behind Panay. If they need a first down to effectively clinch the game like they did in 2022 against the Minnesota Vikings, get him running and then throw him the football. Like, Panay Sewell is just one of those once in a lifetime type players. I truly think that when it's all said and done, a guy like him belongs in the same breath as your Trent Williams. He belongs in the same breath as your Anthony Munoz. Your greatest offensive lineman of all time. Panay can definitely live up to the billing.
Yeah. Now, back to kind of shift off of the offensive line. Typically, my first question here would be, what's the goal for the team this year? But I think I skipped that one here because I think the goal is pretty obvious after you go as far as they did in the playoffs last year. The goal is to be number one. It's to win the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, that's the goal. It still feels very weird, Quentin, to keep on saying that.
Yeah,
as a Lions fan,
I bet. But so what's one area when you look at the roster or the starting lineup or both where you say that could be the spot that prevents us from reaching that goal?
Yeah, I think it's the secondary, specifically the cornerbacks, and the Lions did an awful lot this offseason to revamp their secondary. And, they made a trade to get Carlton Davis from Tampa Bay. They signed Amik Robertson from Vegas, from the Raiders. And they also they're planning on moving Brian Branch more into a safety role. But then with their first two picks, I mean, they go back, they double dip at cornerback and take Terrion Arnold from Alabama. They move up and grab him. And then they also get Ennis Rakestraw, a guy that a lot of people had been mocking to the Lions all the way down at the bottom of the first round until, he tested a little bit poorly in the 40, which, I don't know, make of it what you will, but I think they got an absolute dog in that player. I think Rakestraw is just a guy who totally fits the mantra of this coaching staff and of what they want in their cornerbacks. And Terrion Arnold is another guy too, who's a great example, but it's just a lot of new pieces. It's a lot of young players in Arnold and Rakestraw. I think, you can pencil in Carlton Davis as, one of the outside starting corners. I think Terrion Arnold is going to be your other starting corner outside, but it's a rookie. And we've seen it time and time before that sometimes these cornerbacks are, they take a while. I get the feeling that there's enough going around Terrion Arnold that, he's not stuck being a top cornerback on a bad football team. So maybe you can help, hide some of his learning curves along the way. But it's just it's a lot of new pieces that are getting put in. The Lions did the same exact thing last year, though. You see another name on the list like Emmanuel Mosley. Well, he's a guy that they brought in on a cheap 1-year prove-it deal who was coming off of an ACL injury, and he makes it 2 snaps into his Lions career and tears his ACL again. So they're counting on Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, another player who the Lions thought, hey, this guy's going to be the key piece. He's going to be the straw that stirs the drink in the secondary. He gets hurt against the Seahawks and tears a pec or a bicep. It was one of those two. And, he's rehabbing all the way till the end of the year. And, it was just the hits kept on coming. Cam Sutton, again, a player who a lot of people, including myself, had a lot of hope that he would fit really well here in Detroit. Didn't work out. Kindle Vildor was the starting cornerback in the NFC Championship game. You guys know Kindle Vildor.
Old friend alert.
Friend alert.
I do have to say this about Vildor. I think he is a very sound, very quality football player who is just 2 inches too short and an inch too short of arms. And it's just like he's in position all the time, but he just physically cannot make the play that he needs to make.
Yeah. I mean, no knock on Kindle Vildor. He's going to be an awesome, player towards the bottom of the depth chart for this football team. As your outside starting cornerback against Brandon Ayuk, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, it truly is that Q. Like I think that there's just a lot of new faces, and we'll see how they kind of hit the ground running. But you can't fault Brad Holmes and say, hey, the biggest problem from a year ago was the secondary. What have you done to improve it? I mean, I just listed a bunch of guys who are brand new faces and a lot of draft capital that's been invested in improving this group. So,
yeah, no, I think that makes all the sense in the world. And I like how you tempered some of the expectations for a rookie corner, right? Like as Bears fans, we can sit here and tell you, we're all really excited about Tyreek Stevenson this year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But you know what? Tyreek Stevenson gave up 800 yards and 9 touchdowns last year in the process. Like, it's a rookie corner. That's kind of what they do. It took about half the year for him to figure it out. And then the second half of the year, he played really well, and those numbers were cut in half. But like the damage from the first half of the year was still there, right? It's still in the record. It's still in your stats.
Sure.
So I think that, and I do think Terry Arnold is coming as a bit more polished, or not polished, but a bit higher rated of a prospect than Tyreek Stevenson was. But I think that there's some similar concern around that anytime you're talking about a rookie corner. I mean, heck, not to bring up old trauma, but I mean, you guys can think back to like Jeff Okudah, right? Like he was as highly touted as they come. Like everyone loved Jeff Okudah.
Yeah, there's been a laundry list that Tease Tabor. I don't know if that name rings a bell for you, but I mean, I think a lot of people kind of got flashbacks when they saw the Lions take Rakestraw after he ran the 40 that he ran. It's like, oh, it's Tease Tabor all over again. It's like they're two different players totally. But yeah, I mean, the corner, I think corner is still just one of those positions. Like we've seen wide receiver, right? We've seen guys first year in the league, boom, doesn't matter. It's a totally different beast though. Like years and years ago, it was, oh man, like it takes, some time for wide receivers to get acclimated to the league. Corner, it's just stayed that way. And I think you have players like, Sauce Gardner, who, why can't every player be like Sauce? It's like, well, Sauce is really good.
It's one of one.
Yeah. One of one. Exactly. So yeah, it's something to definitely keep an eye on for the Lions.
And so I listen to, like, because I do these, I listen to a lot of different podcasts from a lot of different teams. And I've heard on some various different Lions podcasts that Amik Robertson is potentially in the nickel for you guys at times this year. And I found that odd because my understanding of Amik Robertson when he was coming out of college was that he's an outside corner. And my understanding with him with the Raiders was that he was an outside corner, unless I missed something this past year where he kicked inside. Do you know the answer to that? Does he have much experience in the nickel?
He has a little bit, not a ton. I know because he's just a small guy. I mean, he's 5'8", 183,
right.
But
no, he's tiny.
Yeah.
He was good at his job though. Like it was shockingly good. I remember at times.
Yeah, for sure. moonlighted there every once in a while. I'm looking at last year's snap counts. Week 4 he played 43 snaps in the slot.
Okay.
Week 7 he played 31. But I mean, last year he had 100 total snaps in the slot. So
Okay.
did a little bit here and there, but I think he might be better suited to be an outside corner. But I think that the Lions they'll find playing time for this guy. They traded for Carlton Davis. They probably had a plan that they were going to walk out of the draft on day 1 or early day 2 with at least one cornerback in my mind, or in my opinion. But they still signed Amik. You know what I mean? And they didn't give him some insignificant amount of money. So they clearly value the player, and they think that he fits the mentality. And yeah, I think that right now you're looking at, like I mentioned, Arnold and Carlton Davis on the outside. Amik is going to be in the slot. I think that Ennis Rakestraw has an opportunity to push him in training camp. But I think those are your 3 starting corners. And what's most interesting, though, Q, is the trade-off. Brian Branch was your nickel cornerback last season. Something really interesting about the Lions playoff run is, Branch was playing over 90% of snaps against the Rams in the wild card, and against the Buccaneers in the divisional round. He played 40% of snaps against the 49ers because they didn't really need a nickel corner on the field. They wanted to prioritize getting some safety help out there to deal with Kittle and McCaffrey. And, I think they maybe said to themselves, hey, this is for Brian Branch too. Like, he's just such an awesome football player. He has incredible instincts that, going back to last training camp with CJ Gardner-Johnson, they signed him to be their nickel corner, and Brian Branch moved him out of that spot because they said, look, we want this guy just as close to the line of scrimmage as possible, because it's see ball, get ball for him. Very active tackler. He'll get his nose in anything. But it's interesting, though, that they want to move Brian Branch more back to a safety role because, they have a Fatu Melifonwu, they have Kirby Joseph. They have 3 guys that legitimately can be out there at any time. But Brian Branch, they just want to make sure that he knows more responsibilities so that they don't end up in a spot where I think Brian Branch is one of their top 10 talents on their team, offense or defense.
I think
easily.
Easily.
Yeah. And they don't want him off the field. So find a way to keep him on the field all the time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I think they're going to have an opportunity here to get really creative with it. Different, because I feel like they do have guys like I believe Carlton Davis has spent time in the slot. Amik Robertson evidently has spent some time there. And Terrion Arnold was asked to do a lot at Alabama. I think he can take a lot on his plate. And Rakestraw, similar at Mizzou. I think he was asked to do a lot of different things. Combine that with Branch's versatility, I think you have a very Morpheus kind of. I'm not even sure if that's a real word. I just said like the Matrix Morpheus, but like a very complementary bunch of skill sets that can be very multiple in your secondary that I think can be really interesting in a variety of roles for guys.
Yeah. The one guy who's static is Kirby Joseph. That guy is a free safety. They want him back there just patrolling and using his instincts to make plays on balls back there. That's to your point. That's a great point. Q is like they have guys who can just move all around, and things get real confusing for defenses when you can't ID players.
Right. So that's bad for me though, as a Bears fan, because we're sitting here saying that's the biggest weakness, and I'm seeing a big potential strength in it if a few things go right here. But let's get back to the next question and looking more schematically at stuff. How would you describe the Lions' offensive scheme?
I don't think death by 1,000 paper cuts is like so much a football term, but that's what they want to do. They want to bring physicality to your doorstep and say, this is how tough and this is how hard we're going to play. Are you going to match it? And we saw some times throughout the season last year where, they ran the ball with David Montgomery 32 times. That didn't happen in any other week, but they did it that night because the Packers had their, hands on their hips. They were breathing. They didn't want to keep on tackling David Montgomery that night. And offensively, schematically, when it comes to their run game, it's so diverse. They're running a lot of zone. They're running a lot of gap. They're doing all these different exotic run schemes that really allows them to look at a team and say, how do we think that they are most susceptible on defense to a specific kind of running game? And the Lions are going to do that until you stop them from doing it, essentially. Like, if Dan Campbell or Ben Johnson could get 4 or 5 yards on every play, they're going to do it. And they will do it because they trust that Jared Goff, somebody who they paid a lot of money, is not going to turn the football over. And they feel like if we feel comfortable and confident in our ability to protect the football, the Lions would love a 14-play, 7.5-minute drive. That would absolutely tickle them pink. And they'll throw in the play as soon as you're lulled to sleep every once in a while with, a weird flea flicker, or, hey, the Z receiver is coming in motion and it's JMO and he's getting the ball and they're running, off to the races. But really, schematically, Q, it's a game that all starts with, we want to run the football on 1st and 2nd down to get ourselves in a 3rd and manageable, and we'll go from there.
Man, I just gotta say, because you mentioned Monty against the Packers, and I swear,
thank you so much. Thank you so much.
If David Montgomery played the Green Bay Packers 17 games a year, he would be in the Hall of Fame. I do not know why he runs the way he does against the Pack. Like, he runs angry against everybody, but he saves a little extra just for Green Bay.
Yeah, David Montgomery is, and I've been trying to remind people all off season long, because there's a lot of offensive skill players in Detroit. People need to stop forgetting that David Montgomery is so essential. He is the essence of this football team. Like, and it's no knock on the Bears offensive line when he was in Chicago.
It's okay. You can.
It
was rough.
I thought they were a little bit overhyped. There were a lot of metrics that said, the Bears were like a top 10, run blocking offensive line by certain metrics. And it's like, I don't know if I see it. Like, how are they getting that done? And I just don't know.
Fields makes up for a lot in the run game.
Absolutely, right. Like that's probably part of the magic to how some of those numbers may be skewed. But like, watching David Montgomery last year, like, it's just an absolute treat, because he is such a throwback football player. He is so quintessential to what the Lions want to do offensively.
Now, if you were an opposing defensive coordinator, how would you attack the Lions offense?
Pressure up the middle. And I know that might be a cop-out answer, because it's a lot of places around the league that, if you get pressure along the interior, it's pretty hard for the quarterback to operate. But when you have a guy like Jared Goff, who doesn't do almost anything off schedule, that guy is not extending plays. He is not making plays with his legs, unless it's like a designed, hey, the ball's over there. No, it really isn't. Like, I'm Jared Goff on a silly little
a naked bootleg.
Yeah. He's just new boot goofing out, for like a 3-yard touchdown run. Like, Jared Goff is not fleet of foot. Jared Goff is not extending plays. If you get pressure along the interior, it's going to be a long day for the Lions offense. And I think you saw that last year. One of the most embarrassing games, and probably the low point of the NFL season last year as a Lions fan, was that loss to the Bears in Chicago late in the season, where, I even wrote an article where I was like, okay, this is the blueprint. And this is what I'm concerned about any Lions playoff run, is that they're going to see the way that the Bears were able to generate pressure, especially along the interior, and how that just is a nightmare for Jared Goff, because he's such a, he's finding that, last stop in his drop. He's making a throw on schedule. He knows his receiver is going to be there. He knows where the ball's going. He's super accurate when he's working in rhythm. It's not a surprise to be like, oh yeah, Jared Goff has completed his last 13 passes. But as soon as you generate that interior pressure, all bets are off. Yeah,
no, I mean, I'm really glad that that's what you said, actually, because there's me and in another podcast I do, we have this conversation all the time, because he's a big Jared Goff fan. He thinks that Jared Goff is extremely underrated, which I'm not here to argue for or against right now. But my thing always comes down to, when I'm tiering, I have QBs with superpowers ahead of QBs who don't have superpowers, right? And that's, to me, that's the epitome of Jared Goff. It's like he is so good mentally, so good with the rhythm and the timing and all of that. But if he needs to change his arm angle to get it around interior pressure, I'm just not sure he can. If he needs to float out of the pocket away from that interior pressure, I'm not sure he's getting very far before he's taken down. Like, it's those things, like you said. So I'm just glad to hear it that I'm not alone, that I get some validation on that, I guess.
Yeah, Jared Goff looks like Clark Kent, and he can do everything. Like, he can go save a kitten in a tree, not proving that he's Superman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there is no superpower to Jared Goff. Like, Jared Goff's superpower is all of the players that the Lions have put around him. Jared Goff's accuracy is maybe his superpower, but I feel like there's a lot of accurate quarterbacks in the NFL. It's weird, but he's won everybody over in Detroit. He's an interesting study. It's going to be very interesting to look back at his career and analyze it.
It really will be, especially with some of it being documented on a podcast through The Athletic and all that. I feel like there's some fine detail to his career and kind of the bumps that went with it, especially in LA in that the Play Callers series that I found really interesting, that is going to give a little more insight into future decisions, I guess, as to the way the quarterback development might go.
Yeah.
Now, staying on the scheme questions, how would you describe the Lions' defensive scheme?
I think it's going to be much different than it was a year ago, because the Lions finally have some personnel, specifically at cornerback, to do the things that Aaron Glenn wants to do, which is he wants to be in press man. He just hasn't had press man cornerbacks capable of getting the job done. So I think that changes a lot of things schematically for them. Up front, with Hutchinson and, adding DJ Reader, which I think is a very undervalued, underappreciated, and under talked about move for the Lions defense. Yeah, I wouldn't be happy about it if I was an NFC North fan. Just from the sole fact that I think so many people are hyper focused on the Lions need to get an edge rusher opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. Aiden Hutchinson needs a bookend. They do this little, prove it deal with Marcus Davenport. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, I still think the Lions will be okay, because DJ Reader and Aleem McNeil, which one are you going to double team? And that becomes the question when both those guys are on the football field. They can both move out. They can line up as a 3-tech. One of them can be a nose guard. It gets really interesting. If the Lions are able to stop you on 1st and 2nd down and you're in 3rd and 7, well, they're putting their NASCAR package out there. They're kicking Aiden Hutchinson inside. Aleem McNeil can line up as a 5-tech if you want to get freaky with it. Their defensive line has a lot of versatility to it. And, getting DJ Reader and Aleem McNeil, it was really tough to run on the Lions last year. It's going to be even tougher to run on the Lions this year with those guys up front. But yeah,
their linebackers aren't going to have to get downhill all the time.
No, they're not. And I think that
I felt like you could beat their linebackers over the top at times last year because they were coming downhill so hard. DJ Reader kind of solves a lot of that, I think, which as a Bears fan, I'm not really happy about. But as a football fan and a fan of defensive scheme, I appreciate.
Yeah. It's and the other thing with the linebackers too, Jack Campbell was a rookie last year, just a rookie. I mean, he was a dog chasing cars at sometimes. He definitely showed a lot of improvement and progress once he finally got settled into that Mike position, because Anzalone has really, really grown into an awesome will linebacker. Jack Campbell, the Lions defense, sometimes they want to include a Sam. They want to have a rushing linebacker. They put Jack Campbell there last year against the Ravens when they got absolutely, the tar kicked out of them. And it was just a really tough look for a rookie trying to play a new spot in the Sam linebacker. But James Houston, they have some guys who can play that role, but again, like that, it's not part of their base defense. They can switch into that when they want to get into, like the NASCAR package that I mentioned, or if they see an opportunity, they'll take an opportunity. But like I mentioned, I think Aaron Glenn finally has some personnel where he can finally play his secondary the way he wants to play it. And it's going to be really interesting. Like that, this is going to be the telltale sign of whether or not the Lions are serious contenders this year, is if their defense is ready, because their defense, they made some timely plays last year, especially in the playoffs. And then the wheels just kind of fell off towards the the end of the second half in the NFC Championship game, and it was cornerback play. It was the arms that were just too short on Kindle Vildor, and the face mask that was just a little too stiff that allowed that ball to end up in Brandon Ayuk's hands.
I know the play. I was I had a little chuckle when it happened, but then I feel bad for him.
He, again, in position to make the play. Yeah. Just didn't make it.
Always in position.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the race car package. Is Mekhi Wingo in the race car package?
I don't know. That's a guy who I'm really excited to see in training camp. Everybody has wanted to slot an undersized 3-tech defensive lineman to the Lions ever since Brad Holmes has arrived, because he famously was the guy who was thumping the table for Aaron Donald back in St. Louis. Wingo's finally one of those guys. He's the first one that, the Lions have drafted. A lot of people wanted him to get Kalijah Cansey. A lot of people wanted him to maybe take Braden Fisk from, this draft in Florida State. Nope. Finally it was Mekhi Wingo in the 6th round.
I know there's injury issues. I had Mekhi Wingo over Braden Fisk on my board, and that is, based on draft order, I was way off. But I'm hoping that I might have been a little bit right, as long as the injuries. Even again, as a Bears fan, I know I can't be sitting here rooting for Lions players, but Mekhi Wingo was one of my dudes in this draft. I'm thinking that he has a lot of talent.
I get that as a Lions fan. Last year the Bears had a draft where I was like, please stop drafting the players that I like. I love Darnell Wright. I was super interested in the idea of the Lions, maybe starting him out at guard and then moving him to a tackle position. And when it's time for Taylor Decker to move on, and then later on in the draft, it's Roschon Johnson. I'm like, oh, that's another player that I was interested in the Lions taking, just from he fits the mold of a very physical runner that the Lions would love to have. But yeah, I totally get looking at some drafts, especially, you do so much work in the pre-draft process. You know what I mean? You study guys, you have your draft crushes, and then they go to an NFC North team. It's like, all right.
Especially when they go to the Packers, man. That's the worst.
Okay, we can all agree on that. That's just not good for anybody.
They shouldn't be allowed to take players anymore.
Yeah. They just they're the fantasy football team that auto drafts, and then they have to take everybody from the waiver wire.
Boom. Perfect.
Yeah.
But so as an opposing offensive coordinator, to bring this back to the topic a little bit that I strayed us away from.
Sorry. Yeah.
How would you, I'm the one who did the straying, but how would you attack the Lions defense?
Yeah. Well, if there's an offense, I think that's in the NFC North, funny enough, I think it's the Chicago Bears. They're loaded with talent in terms of their skill positions. I think the way, and as a Bears fan, this, for the past couple of years, it's been running mobile quarterbacks are the absolute kryptonite for the Detroit Lions. It didn't matter if it was Lamar Jackson punking them last season. It didn't matter if it was Justin Fields. When the Lions played the Bears, Justin Fields got his, no matter what, when it came to running the football. That's still a problem until I'm proven otherwise. They didn't add a player that I would say all of a sudden changes it. They need players like Jack Campbell to, pick up some more situational awareness and not think before he does something, instinctually kind of see the play before it happens and making a play. Because when it comes to stopping mobile quarterbacks, Aaron Glenn is somebody who does not believe in spying the quarterback. He fundamentally does not believe in having a player out there just being tied up to the guy with the football, because I think fundamentally he just thinks that ball is going to come out of the quarterback's hand. We're going to pressure that quarterback, and we'll have a guy maybe sitting in zone, or they'll either have a safety or a linebacker who's, man to man on the tight end, whatever it may be. Aaron Glenn just doesn't believe in spying the quarterback. Well, Caleb Williams is a very mobile guy, so it remains to be seen whether or not the Detroit Lions, who add a big guy like DJ Reader, who stuffs the run along the interior, but it's not doing a whole lot to chase down Caleb Williams when he escapes outside, which again, that's something else that kind of feeds into this is Aiden Hutchinson. You want to talk about a guy who his superpower is just relentlessness. He is going to keep on going and going and going, and he'll eventually maybe get his, but that's why he adds up so many pressures throughout an NFL season, is because he just does not quit. However, he's a guy who gets caught, coming to inside, right? He's not holding contain. He's letting players get outside of him. I think that this is going to be a big year for Aiden Hutchinson to prove that he's a more disciplined football player. It's hard though, because how do you tell the guy to pull back his superpower, which is, again, use the same analogy, who's a dog chasing cars? How do you put a leash on that guy and say, well, you know what, you need to pull that back a little bit? Well, if he pulls back a little bit of that, won't quit, well, then maybe you don't have a guy who's playing to his full potential. So it's a fine line for Aiden Hutchinson to find, but I think if there's a guy who's going to do it, one of the biggest offseason additions for the Detroit Lions was hiring defensive line coach Terrell Williams from the Tennessee Titans, who has done amazing work over there. And Dan Campbell has done nothing but saying his praises since he arrived. Brad Holmes, they both think that he's the best defensive line coach in the NFL. I mean, you got a young player like Aiden Hutchinson, a young player like Aleem McNeil. Now's the time to show it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I found that all really interesting. Like I did not realize that Aaron Glenn does not spy the quarter like that. Instantly kind of explains some of the massive Justin Fields runs against Detroit, because from what you told me, wants to run man coverage and won't spy the quarterback. Those are two ways to get absolutely killed by a running quarterback. Like that makes all the sense in the world to me now. And two, I didn't realize that Hutchinson had issues with that outside contain. Like you can watch tape on other teams, you can listen to but you're not going to get all the details that someone who actually covers the team and creates content for it sees and hears. So that's why I love having people like you on the show to learn something like that.
Yeah, that's the beauty of just getting a chance to talk to people, right? Who watch, a little bit more closely and a little bit more intently. I'm not a Chicago Bears expert by any means, so I think I get to see him a couple times a year. And a player like Aiden Hutchinson, again, I have all the faith that he's going to be a very good player for a very long time. He's a guy who you don't want ever hitting the market. Like, how edge players, the really, really good ones, the elite ones, they don't hit the market because they're worth their weight in gold. As a Chicago Bears fan, Montez Sweat at the deadline was, what kind of godsend was that for the Chicago Bears over the second half of the season?
It changed everything on the defensive line. It multiplied everybody's ability suddenly, just out of nowhere.
Right. Yeah. And if you can get Aiden Hutchinson to be a guy who, again, he's a guy who he builds on things, but it takes time. And sometimes there just isn't that down to down consistency with him, that you see him kind of disappear for stretches. But again, aside from Aleem McNeil, who are some of the great defensive linemen that he's played with? There isn't a long list of guys that he's had an opportunity to play alongside, which is why I'm so excited about DJ Reader getting added to the defensive line. But high hopes for Hutchinson. It's just there's a little bit of, he gets compared to Max Crosby a lot, and I don't know why, because watching the Raiders game last season, Max Crosby is on a quarterback's butt like in the snap of a finger.
They win in very different ways. Like
different ways.
There might be a reason why he's being compared, but I'll stay away from that.
Yeah, I can't quite put my finger on it.
Yeah, precisely.
But yeah, the thing with the Lions though too, and real quick we can put a cap on the defense and what maybe an offense can kind of capitalize on is their, and it doesn't really improve with DJ Reader, their snap to pressure. Like if there was a time, if there was I know there's some outlets on there behind some paywalls that keep a lot of this data privy to them and to teams specifically, but like from the snap of the ball to when you're making pressure to the quarterback, the Lions have to rank near the bottom of the NFL. And again, a big guy like DJ Reader, that's not going to change, a ton unless they get a little bit, interesting with their schematics and where they're lining people up, and maybe they can scheme some guys open or do some stuff with some stunts or twists or whatever it may be. But again, Aiden Hutchinson isn't a guy who's breaking right off the line and getting in the quarterback's face like within a second. Max Crosby's a guy who does. Nick Bosa's a guy who does.
Right.
There's a few guys who do that. I haven't seen that out of Hutchinson unless he's unblocked.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, Hutchinson's probably more like a Montez Sweat, where it's like, I mean, I think Montez Sweat has some more impressive physical gifts, but he's still, with his length and his brute force and size, he's just not going to win fast in the same way. He wins through guys more than he wins by running by guys.
100% Aiden Hutchinson. And as a run defender, he's tough, right? Because he's long. He can hold guys off of him, but he gets into trouble when he starts crashing inside. And that's, the running quarterbacks, like you said, playing man. Well, their head is not looking towards the line of scrimmage where Justin Fields is breaking off for 40 yards.
Right. Now, circling back to something that you mentioned a little bit earlier, one of my questions here was, why do you think Goff struggled against the Bears in 23? And we got a little bit into that with you saying the interior pressure, but it sounds like you wrote an article about this being kind of the recipe to beating the Lions offense. What were your thoughts on that and what the Bears did to get to Goff?
Yeah. The part of the narrative with Goff too is, a guy who went and played in Cal. He went to Los Angeles. He's been a fair weather, literally, a fair weather quarterback his entire career. It's like is he going to wear gloves? Is he not going to wear gloves? I think that the Bears in that game, they put out the book on how to stop the Detroit offense and how to stop Jared Goff. In that game, it was an 8.3 passer rating. The Bears, I don't think they were quite as aggressive in their first matchup when they played the Lions at Ford Field. They got way more aggressive against Detroit in that I think it was week 14 matchup last year. It was bad. I mean, the Bears, they blitzed Goff on only 11 of his 39 dropbacks, but he completed 4 of his 10 passes for 13 yards and an interception on those 11 dropbacks. It's just getting pressure on quarterbacks like Jared Goff who aren't mobile. It just rushes everything for him and things crumble. And he's a guy who does have trouble holding onto the football at times. So it's easy to, take a swipe at the football and have Jared Goff an errant fumble and then it's, the other team's ball. And it happened on Thanksgiving against the Green Bay Packers too. It was pressure, and it can be frustrating because you wonder at times, and especially in that week 14 matchup last year, it was, man, like, don't the Lions know that the Bears are going to they're going to get pressure on Jared Goff? And it seems like they didn't really scheme or game plan for it. And with Jared Goff, there is a little bit to his game too, where you're watching him and you feel like he's a deer in the headlights sometimes, especially if early on, and this is, I guess, something else that I think that, I don't know if it's just bias or, I noticed it a couple times and now I just think it's a matter of fact. But if you hit Jared Goff a couple times in the first quarter, or you get to him and you sack him and you make him feel what it's like to have, a defensive lineman like land on him. There's a little bit to his game where you see him a little bit more skittish. He's speeding up a little bit. He's not as comfortable as he wants to be. If the Lions are able to use those first 2 scripted drives of the first half and they move the ball effortlessly, you're going to be in for a long day. But if you rattle Jared Goff in the beginning of the game, there's something to him that it takes a while for him to get settled down, and it takes a while for him to get back and comfortable. And I think that's what the Bears capitalized on in that matchup last season, where it was like, okay, like I know how opposing defenses can stop Jared Goff, and it's just interior pressure and making him feel uncomfortable.
Interesting. So I think it's almost kind of funny sometimes the way the different quarterbacks might react to stuff like that. Because I remember, I feel like Matt Stafford was a little bit like this, and I know for a fact Jay Cutler was like this. The game didn't start till they took a good knock. Like, they felt like they were sleepwalking until it was like they get put in the dirt with a little extra, and then it's like the game just started. Like, I know Jay Cutler was 100% like that.
Yeah. It was almost like those guys, like they just needed to take one on the chin, and then they're like, okay, like it's a football game now, right?
Yeah.
With Jared Goff, don't get me wrong, like he'll bounce back. He's a very resilient quarterback, but it just seems like it might take a drive, or it might take a couple drives. And in the NFL, that, and this was a big problem for them in 2022. They had some problems with it in 2023, but they'll just be, 2 or 3 drives. The third quarter was a nightmare for the Lions last season. It was like, okay, like everybody was trying to make sense of it, and like, what's happening at halftime? Like, why is it 3 and out? Why is it 3 and out? Why is it, a 6-play drive that ends in a turnover? The third quarter would just absolutely eat the Lions up. But here's one other thing, Q, about Jared Goff. If you can congest the passing lanes across the middle of the field, the Lions just haven't, up to this point, been a team that will take shots downfield. And whether or not that's because, integrating Jameson Williams into the offense hasn't been so seamless when, his rookie year, he was essentially injured for the entire season. Then the following year, he has the gambling stuff and the soft tissue injuries in training camp. Him and Jared Goff are still really trying to develop a rapport with one another. And that's the one thing that this offense does not have. This offense doesn't have a ton of downfield plays because it's one-on-one with a guy, and the Lions guy is going to beat you, right? Like, the Lions want Jameson Williams to be the Tyreek Hill. They want him to be a field stretcher who, a Justin Jefferson, so to speak. But Jared Goff, is he a guy who has the ability to get it down there like that? That kind of runs counter to what I told you about when it comes to the Lions offensively, when it comes to their schematics. Like, they're death by 1,000 paper cuts. They want to work the middle of the field. They want to work seam routes with Laporta, tight end. They want Amon-Ra St. Brown to be running across the middle of the field and grab a pass. It's, it remains to be seen whether or not the Lions are going to develop a part of their offense and have it be outside the hash marks and down the football field.
Well, and it's almost kind of funny when you say that, like, death by 1,000 paper cuts, working the middle of the field sounds like the antithesis of the Bears' defensive philosophy, which is force them to beat you by death from 1,000 paper cuts, but keep the middle of the field clean, right? Like, but away from the middle of the field, we have a lot of help towards the middle of the field. We want teams to have to use the sidelines in the cover 2 concepts, even though they run mostly cover 3 now. It's still that Tampa 2 kind of basis of the way they run the defense of we have that deep middle locked up. We want our safeties ball hawking towards the middle of the field. We want our corners jamming with the wide receivers all towards the middle of the field. We're trying to funnel the football to the middle of the field and not give up big plays. So force them to beat you with 1,000 paper cuts. And one of those attempts, you'll get a turnover. You'll get a take. So it's almost like a immovable object and a a hard place, right? It's kind of two things trying to do the same thing, but on opposite sides of the football. Where
Yeah, it's interesting.
It is. It's a real test of, I think, a passer's ability to stay disciplined within sticking with that approach and taking what is there consistently versus the defense being tested to be that disciplined in what they're doing, to keep saying, okay, no, we're not going to jump this route here because that's what they want us to do. And that's going to be down there, like it's that there's parallels to that I'm finding really interesting within it. But speaking of the matchup, how do you see the Lions faring against the Bears in 2024? How do you see this all going?
Well, I need to ask you a question, Q, because I need to understand now I know that Justin Fields was a player who, it really struggled to develop, now maybe to no fault of his own with, offensive coordinator and coaching changes and this, that, and so forth. And I mean, did he really even have a number one wide receiver until he finally got DJ Moore last year? You know what I mean? So I understood why Bears fans thought, hey, this is the time where we can get the cheat code to roster building in the NFL, which is the rookie quarterback on a rookie contract. And they've made good on putting a lot of talent around Caleb Williams, which like that just makes quarterbacks better. Like it seems so simple to say, but hey, look no further than Tua, right?
Yeah.
They get Tyreek Hill, they get Jalen Waddle, and what are they doing? I mean, they're A-Chain and Mostert and that awesome running game that Mike McDaniel has, and we're going to grab Odell Beckham Jr., and we're just going to have as much talent around Tua, and lo and behold, and you have everybody saying, well, Tua's not talented, it's just the players around him. It's like, this is the NFL, folks. I don't know what to tell you, but look at Jared Goff in Detroit, right? Like in 2021, there were people, myself included, that had a lot of question marks about Jared Goff and whether or not he can get it done. And they got some talent around him, and there it is. Like, okay, I get it. Like I see how Jared Goff can work in the NFL. With moving on from Justin Fields, a guy who was notorious for holding onto the football for too long and trying to make too many super, heroic plays. That's what Caleb Williams' superpower was in college football, was holding onto the ball and making, heroic plays. Does that concern you at all in his rookie season?
He's going to take some hits. And I have a good friend of mine. He goes by Start Kyle Orton on Twitter, Kyle Morris. He dove deep into this because he was a big Drake May guy, right? And he was like, and the main reason was because it's the same fatal flaw. Let's get away from that. But as everyone was like trying to talk to him about like, well, no, but Caleb's different. He's like, why? And he's digging this whole time. How is Caleb different? And where you end up with is you can find in the numbers that, and on the tape for that matter, that Caleb's actually, when he stays in structure, he's on time, he's consistent, he is very clean at doing what he's supposed to do. That structure tended to break down fast at USC last year, especially. Mm-hmm. And Caleb is potentially the largest outlier for time to throw since time to throw has become a tracked stat.
Yeah.
Like his time to throw on scramble runs was something I want to say around 6 seconds.
Yeah, he was like at the bottom of
doesn't
FBS.
Happen,
yeah,
right. Like the next closest was like 5 1/4. Like it
wasn't close. Yeah.
Gap. So the way I look at that is saying I combine that with looking at his pocket presence on tape, his Aaron Rodgers-esque ability to manipulate the pocket at this age, even if it's against the college level. I'm seeing that as a major plus, and it's not stuff that you ever really saw on Fields tape. So the way that I see it, Caleb's superpower is that pocket presence and scrambling and ability to buy time. It's not the speed. It's not the running ability. It's the spatial awareness, the presence within the pocket of being able to just do things others can't. And that's where I am okay with the time to throw stuff. That's how I got to the point of it. And if you are more interested in it, and any listeners, I highly encourage you to go over to, I believe it's on the Bears blog, and read this article he wrote. It's like a manifesto about it. It's extremely detailed, and my description here couldn't come close to doing it justice.
Yeah, I'll be interested to check that out, because that's just something that it seemed a little bit like too 1-to-1. Obviously, like they're not the same player. I don't think that they're the same arm talent. I don't think that they're, in terms of their pre-snap reads and things like that. Again, there's a lot of room for Fields to grow. And I was somebody who, like, I understood that if the Bears did want to move on and take Caleb like they did, it made sense. But I also, like, understood the contingent that was like, well, I mean, what can you do with the first overall pick? Like, I'm sure you could even get more first round picks, just like they did a year ago when they got DJ Moore. And
it could even be a boat.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I also get the sense, and I understand Bears fans who are like, okay, but, like, we don't want the boat. We just want, we want Caleb Williams.
It was like a civil war on Bears Twitter.
Oh, yeah. Like, I saw a lot
of the fan base wanted Fields to stick around. And I mean, I personally I mourned the death of the Justin Fields era in September. So I was well past it. Of, like,
gotcha.
I'm excited for Caleb, but a lot of people weren't there yet. They didn't, really feel like Fields was done yet. And I think it took a lot to come to terms with some of that. And in some ways, I think some people are still coming to terms with it.
Yeah, you were just in a different stage of grieving.
Yeah, exactly.
I get it. Yeah, so when it comes to how the Lions are going to fare against the Bears this year, I was really hoping that the Lions would get the Bears early in their schedule, because that's when I love for the football team I root for to catch rookie quarterbacks. Is at the beginning of their NFL life cycle. Lo and behold, the Lions are playing one cold weather outdoor game, and it's against Chicago late in the season. I think they're going to split just like they did last year. I think they're going to split.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's perfectly fair. I mean, I think in my projections, I have a split. But yeah, I think that's the most reasonable way to expect it, because it's like, that's what happened last year. Both teams got better. I mean, I think the Lions, I do have to say, I am nervous about the DJ Reader edition and how that's going to change the defense, and nervous about how the Bears can generate interior pressure. But I was nervous about the interior pressure last year too, so I'm willing to put that on the shelf for now. But yeah, I'm with you. I think a split does make a lot of sense. Now, Final question here. Who's one player on the rosters that you think is flown under the radar, doesn't get enough shine, that Bears fans or any football fans should keep an eye on when they're watching Lions games?
This is a really good question. Now, it seems obvious to say Jameson Williams, because I think that he kind of gets lost in the shuffle. Everybody wants to talk about Jahmyr Gibbs. I love Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm super excited about Jahmyr Gibbs. I think that in that ESPN ranking that Jeremy Fowler does, where he pulls all the NFL executives and coaches and whatever, and Jahmyr Gibbs being ranked 8th, I thought was wild. I think he's top 5 running back. I'm not sure if you saw the little podcast segment where CJ Stroud and Micah Parsons were building their, ideal offense and their ideal defense for like a 4th and 3 end of the game situation. Defense needs to stop or offense needs to score. CJ Stroud went, he's like, I'm taking Gibbs. Like, he's my running back. It's like, okay, like it's not just like a Detroit thing. It's people around the league, like players are saying Jahmyr Gibbs has juice, and he has crazy juice. I'm super excited for Gibbs. We talked about how important Montgomery is as a Bears fan, and the listeners, they all know how good Monty is. Laporta, I think that he had too big of a rookie season to ever be flying under the radar. I'm super excited to see what he has in store for year 2. Amon-Ra got paid like one of the top wide receivers in the NFL, because he is one of the top wide receivers in the NFL. J-Mo just kind of
ask his older brother.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Their podcast is a hoot, man. I really enjoy listening to those guys go back and forth. But it's J-Mo, and I guess he's more so the I think Jameson Williams and how he'll be used in Detroit is going to be the difference between whether or not the Lions are a top 5 to 8 offense and one of maybe the greatest, most prolific offenses in the history of the NFL. And I really don't want to seem like I'm drinking Honolulu Blue Kool-Aid and only doing that. But all the players we just listed off, they've got NFL tape that says they're legit players in the NFL. If Jameson Williams is a guy who can, 18 yards per reception, a downfield threat, a big play guy who he showed to be in the NFC Championship game, this is going to be a very, very, very good offense for the Detroit Lions. And I think he's just kind of flying under the radar. I think he truly is.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's fair. I watch, for my other podcasts, we do every division, one per week for 8 weeks. And within that, I'll watch 2 to 3 games of all 22 per team. And I didn't go a game of watching the Lions from this past year where JMO was playing that I did not notice him and his speed did not pop on the tape and make me go, oh, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
Like his speed is different. And we saw that at Alabama. We've seen it in the NFL in spades, but it's been about an availability thing, right? And if he's out there getting comfortable, I agree. He is a guy who can be a real difference maker on any offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just developing the rapport with Goff that he hasn't had the opportunity to do. And the Lions coaching staff, they talk about it all the time. They talk about time on task. How much time are you spending doing the things that you're going to be doing on game day? And he's just missed a lot of time. Like point blank, it's no different than being a student in school. If you miss 4 days out of the week and you come back on Friday, you're drinking from the fire hose because you have homework up to your eyeballs and you're lost in every subject. That kind of felt like Jameson Williams in terms of, how crisp he was running his routes, how, whether or not he was being lined up in the right spot. Was he running his routes deep enough and making breaks when he should be making it? Like there was some stuff that was clearly just off. And the NFC Championship game, once he finally started to hit his stride, like literally, there's a still shot of him in the NFC Championship game on the touchdown he scored to open up the game where there's 4 49ers defenders within 2 yards of him. And it's a touchdown. Like there are guys that are 2 yards ahead of him that are, 2 yards to the hash mark. And he's like, I'm gone. Like you're not catching me. It's different speed. Like you said, and it pops when it pops. But can I ask you one final question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why on the earth? Now, I have faith. I think that the Bears are going to be the number 2 team in the NFC North. I think that what I saw from their defense, and I truly applaud them, like paying Jalen Johnson, that was 100% the right move for them to make. I just need to know why the Bears are plus 100 to not make the playoffs. Like why are they minus 110 to make the playoffs? It seems like such a lofty thing to put on Caleb Williams' plate.
Truly, I think it comes down to a defense that forced a lot of turnovers at the end of last year. And, a cynic could sit here and argue that turnover aggression is a real thing and it's not a great indicator. Optimist could sit here and say, well, they're just getting started, right? But that combined with one of the better wide receiver rooms in the NFL and an average O-line, probably. I think they're probably right somewhere in the 15 to 20 range for top O-lines. That this offense is pretty juiced with a supposed, whether you like the word or not, generational quarterback prospect and defense that forced a lot of turnovers. I think you can make the argument that this missing the playoffs could be a disappointment with this team when they have one of the 5 easiest schedules in the NFL, according to Vegas odds.
Yeah, I was looking at their schedule after I saw those odds because I was like, okay, like I need to like just count the wins, and their schedule pretty easy, but it's like the end, right? It's like weeks like 12 or 13 through the end of the season. It's like, oh, those are all going to be challenges.
They're all the divisional games.
Yeah, like all their divisional games were backloaded, but then they have like, oh, it's like at San Francisco. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
that's going to be tough.
Yeah, no, it gets rough down the stretch, and I mean, I don't have a playoff mandate on this team as a expectation.
That feels fair.
I
That
think
feels fair.
9 wins feels about right for them, and there's a chance that 9 wins can make the playoffs for you. So I mean, I think it's them and the Packers are going to be neck and neck for the number 2 spot all year, but maybe Caleb is our prince that was promised, who can finally slay the dragon up there in Green Bay. If he can, maybe they're 10-win team.
Man, and Lions fans thought that was Matthew Stafford for so long, and it never was.
Well, that was the refs.
Yeah.
All right, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell the people where they can find your work, any work you want to highlight, anything at all?
Yeah, sure. I am, as Q mentioned at the top, I'm the senior editor for prideofdetroit.com by way of SB Nation. My Twitter handle's at Ryan_POD. Come and just engage with me and have fun. I love talking football. I love talking opinions. I love talking just about anything. Yeah, I can't wait for this season. Thanks for the opportunity to come on the show, man.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for listening, watching with us, however you followed along. Make sure to go check out ontapsportsnet.com for all your Chicago sports needs. We got Bears, Bulls, Cubs, White Sox, Blackhawks, Fire. We got golf, college football. We got podcasts and articles about pretty much everything Chicago sports and just generally sports related. It's really cool. So go check it out. Thank you for listening, and bear down.